But during the crash down, I started making poor choices. I started drinking a lot more. I started doing anything I could to numb the pain because I just had a major loss. And I was doing whatever it took to just separate me from it. Because I wouldn't confront it, I adopted a lot of abnormal coping skills.
Get ready to tune into stories of average men striving for greatness, to become the leaders that are needed in their homes, in their career, and their communities. This is the Brotherhood of Fatherhood podcast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Brotherhood of Fatherhood podcast. I'm Scott, your host. Today, I have with me Joe, and I'm going to have to re-record that because I didn't put down your last name. What's your last name, Joe?
Wankelman, Wankelman.
Wankelman. Yeah,
Yep.
I don't want to mess that up. Okay, so team, cut all that. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Brotherhood of Fatherhood podcast. Today, I have with me Joe Wankelman. He's a retired Army, 17 years in the Army as a forward observer. And if you don't know what that is, you're probably going to find out in this interview. He spent 4 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, so he's seen some things, but he is also now the COO of BoneFrog Coffee, which happens to be a sponsor of the big event in Montana coming up in September, which you all know because I'm talking about it nonstop. I want you to come. I want you to come and grow with us, do challenging things with us. And the more I research into BoneFrog Coffee, the more I realize there's a real aligned mission, and they're an absolute perfect partner for what we're doing this year and moving forward. So I'm super excited. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Hey, thank you so much. Pleasure to be here. Lucky to be here.
I appreciate it, man. You and I were talking beforehand and doing my research and reading the quotes and the things you sent me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, this is going to be fun. We're going to have a good time. Yeah.
Your mission is right there with mine. And I'm so thankful to just have the opportunity to be on this show with you. So
appreciate it, brother. That means a lot. You know, it's an interesting journey, and you never know who's listening, but you know, as well as I know, when you're putting good things out there, it circles back around. I'll tell you what, I was kind of just reading some of the quotes you sent me and the things that you sent me, and I'm like, we could probably talk for hours, but honestly, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm a little fascinated with the armed services. I personally did not do it. It was not. My dad was in the reserve, I think Army Reserves. He never talked to me much about it, and I wasn't intrigued with it. Later in my life, I'm like, I wish I would have done that. But everybody I've known who's served is like, no, you don't wish you would have done that. But there's absolutely a camaraderie and a there's something to it that I know that I've been searching for, which is kind of why Brotherhood of Fatherhood exists in the first place, in its own right. So, man, 17 years. Let's talk about let's just talk about Joe a little bit about what led you to go into the Army, which you shared a little bit with me already, but I'd love to kind of hear that story.
You know, so I come from a very patriotic family in northern Colorado, Fort Collins, Colorado. And with that, my grandfather was a B-24 pilot in World War II. And, his legend, his stories always resonated me. With the first model I ever made was of a B-24. And so to be a pilot was something, just to be in the military was something the family really respected. And so, growing up, I wish I could have said I was the star athlete. I wish I could say, I was the cool kid and all that stuff. But due to some challenges my parents faced, they split when I was 3. Due to some challenges I struggled with because of that, not really understanding myself, not understanding the world around me. I didn't have the pretty school experience, and I struggled to find myself, to be able to, I just struggled with me, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a senior in high school. I didn't like school. I struggled. I didn't learn how to read until I was like in 6th, 7th grade, right there. And when I mean read, this is like Cat in the Hat, 1 fish, 2 fish. Later found out after, I think I was 37, that I'm dyslexic. And so that was kind of something that I was faced with. So I was known as the kind of the not smart kid, the stupid kid of school. And so I had the choice of joining the military or, in my head, living under a bridge. It's kind of the conversation I was having with myself because I couldn't stay at home at that point. And so I joined the military because they accepted me. And I graduated with like a 1.9 GPA and was thrown into a world that I didn't understand. I mean, Colorado is a beautiful state, but it's landlocked, and it's not as it was a new world going into this military where I'm going to be traveling around and meeting all kinds of people from all different places, and it was I was shell shocked. Basic training, holy cow, that was a unique experience. But with that, what I learned in the military, is I can, with effort, with with a plan, with a vision, with a grit, you can persevere. And so I really started to gain my understanding of who I was. Now, this is a slow process. It didn't happen overnight, but I actually was able to really start to figure out who I was with all of these victories. I started with basic training and then AIT as a forward observer, which, if anybody doesn't know, they're the 2-3-man teams that go in front of the forward line of troops and start calling in the artillery, the helicopters, the Air Force, because the whole goal is to redefine the structure of the enemy forces before they ever get to the infantry. And so, I went through Airborne School, which, interesting fact is I was, I still kind of am scared of heights. And so, I'm jumping out of planes, did air assault school. I actually really proceeded to because of my unwillingness to quit. And this kind of comes back to two things. One is, in high school when I was struggling and I didn't understand things, my dad took me on a rock march, a backpacking trip into the hills of Montana, Bob Marshall. And within 5 miles, I was whining, I was complaining. I didn't want to be here. I wanted to go back to my Game Boy and my cozy comforts and my easier, life, the comfort parts of life. But my dad sat me down and he looked me in the face, and we had one of those real conversations where he's like, Joe, sometimes you just have to put one foot in front of the other. You might not know where you're going, but you're going to get somewhere. And that's kind of what my military experience was at the beginning is, if I signed up, I had to go through with it. I wasn't going to quit. And so I got to experience a lot of incredible things. And it really came to a culmination where I found out there's a different, that I can do it when I applied for flight school and got accepted and ultimately became an Apache pilot and ended up spending 11 plus years flying missions, both in Iraq and Afghanistan, in some of the more interesting situations that occurred in the war on terrorism. And wow. So it's, for whoever's listening, the thing is that you can. It's a determination to not let the world define who you are and realize that, there's a way to connect the dots. There's a way to get there. Another quote that I live my life by is, and this is probably the one that I love the most because it was inspired by Michelangelo. Then I changed it for myself. But it's the human atrocity is not those who shoot for the stars and fall short, but those who shoot for the top of a hill and achieve it. Don't limit yourself. Go after it. Those big dreams that you say are impossible aren't impossible. We got a person on the moon. We're getting, we're in the process of getting people to Mars. Yeah. You can say it's special people who do that, but no, it's you. It's me. It's what I embrace. It's what I live every day. And it started with the Apache really for me, because that's when I realized dreams do come true. And I was able to follow in the footsteps of my grandfather. I was able to become that pilot and lead missions and help the men and women on the ground come home to their families. And so, a lot more to talk about. I'm sure there's a lot more questions, but that's kind of the gist of me. I live my life with the idea of today is going to be better than yesterday. Yep. So let's persevere. Whatever I'm facing, whatever challenges, I'm going to get through it. We're going to find a way. And I'm excited for what happens tomorrow, because I'm living my best today.
Yeah, I mean, we have so much in common in the way that we have an outlook and things. Now, not to say it's perfect every day. I mean, it's almost like a reset for me every single morning. I wake up and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of daunting things in front of me. And, and then as you proceed through the day, my brain starts to get, I've put some things into place where I know, okay, now I'm ready. Now I'm mentally focused and I know I can do the things I need to do. But a real big struggle in my life, and I wasn't, again, in the military, but I really struggled with identity when things changed for me. I mean, for me, it was a bit like I sold a business and it completely changed who I thought I was, and really realizing that I wasn't a business owner. I was much more than what I was doing for a living. I'm sure that's a part of your story. I'm guessing it's a part of your story coming out of the Army, and you kind of mentioned it, and you kind of talked a little bit about your marriage. So I'd like to dig into that, about your journey through, kind of the identity, like what you went through.
Yeah. Getting out of the military. So imagine, I struggled in school. I finally I get into the Apache, and I became the Apache. That was my identity. I finally had, I felt valued. I felt important. I felt, respected. I was doing something rare. I'd go to air shows and sign autographs and do those things. And then when I ultimately, I did have acute kidney failure, which the Army doesn't quite like people whose kidneys aren't functioning at 100%, flying $45 million helicopters. They gave me the option to ride a desk or get out. And I couldn't imagine myself sitting behind a desk. And so I chose to get out. And getting out was the hardest mission I've ever been on. I mean, to go through and lose yourself, lose everything that you've constructed in your head as you, it shakes you to the core. And I mean, it took me maybe 4 or 5 years to rebuild from that. I'm still rebuilding from it in some ways. But during the crash down, I started making poor choices. I started drinking a lot more. I started doing anything I could to numb the pain, because I just had a major loss. Yeah. And I was doing whatever it took to just separate me from it, because I wouldn't confront it. I wouldn't face it. I didn't want to look in the mirror. And so I adopted a lot of abnormal coping skills. And those abnormal coping skills didn't solve the problem. They didn't do anything except for delay and increase the impact when I ultimately had to look at it. And, unfortunately, I became extremely desperate. I became something I look back on, and I'm sad, because ultimately, July 6th, 2016, I decided I didn't want to do it anymore, and I wanted to quit. I felt worthless. I felt hopeless. I felt insignificant. I felt like I didn't belong in the civilian world. I mean, you want to talk about a foreign country. Operating in the civilian world is, transitioning to the civilian world is just as foreign as operating in Afghanistan or Iraq. Only difference is we speak the same language. And when you're operating over there, you have a language barrier. And so, yeah, I attempted suicide.
Oh, wow.
I was done. Um, thank God I failed, because when I woke up and realized, I was sitting on the bed, and it was just a moment of I don't know if it's clarity or what, but I just sat there questioning, is like, why isn't my brain working? Where did I go wrong? This isn't what I dreamed of when I was 5. This isn't what I wanted. This isn't where I wanted to be when I was thinking about, who I wanted to become. And it was one of those, not, it was a moment of really where I just faced it. I was like, okay, what happened? Why am I here? Because this is not what I intended. And this is not what I want. And I'm not doing this again. I'm not going through this. I'm not going to continue to try to solve a problem the same way, hoping there's a different outcome. And so I really started to invest my time in understanding my brain, the wiring of my brain. It started off figuring out what triggered me. Like, what are my trigger points? And I can say, well, this person disrespected me, but really what I came to find out is my trigger points are when I'm belittled, when I'm diminished, when I'm abandoned, when I'm embarrassed. And I started putting these lists of different things that when an action happened, I felt this way. And so then I would respond with an abnormal coping skill that I was, my temper. And my temper was one of the biggest things that I had to figure out where that came from. And so I started an interesting journey into my head, because I had to start going back, like, when did I start adopting these abnormal coping skills? Why did I adopt them? Because these, drinking in excess doesn't bring anything good to the family. And it doesn't bring, a positive, situation. It just numbs me. It actually typically hurts me more, because I feel horrible the next day. Might feel good for the moment, but the next day sucks. And so I then started going back in my past. Well, where'd my temper come from? And I'd ask myself, did I have my temper when I was 34? Yeah, I remember this moment, my ex and I having a situation where I didn't respond well. I let my voice become way too much. Instead of trying to find a positive way through the scenario, I used words that hurt. And I can justify everything, in that moment. Oh, I justify, she hurt me. She, this all, yeah. No, that's all a lie. If you're trying to justify your actions, and yet you're seeing the person you love on the other side, in tears, or you're seeing your children, hesitant to come to you, you don't justify that. There's something up. That's an abnormal coping skill. There's something not there's you're choosing to handle situations in a way that's not healthy. And so, I continue this process, and I stopped always, everything I did, in high school, I wasn't the aggressive type. I was actually very passive, because of the kind of the home I grew up in. But I still had a temper because I was angry at myself all the time. And then, I always ended up, hitting a 3-year-old memory, which was, kind of my first trauma in life, when my parents separated, and the anger and the intensity of that moment for me, and how it really caused me to reel, because that's when I started my first abnormal coping skills of biting my fingernails, and that's when I really became a shell of myself. And, in this process of examining all these moments and examining myself, my life, really going to the root cause, I had to determine do I still want to continue to solve my problems from that 3-year-old perspective, who was hurt, who was, challenged with that? Or do I want to start learning how to adopt normal coping skills and start applying those to my life, because I want to create friendships. I want to create good, healthy, stable relationships with my kids. I want to have, patience and kindness and love, and not be jealous, and not be this hyper competitive person that I adopted. All because really I just, ultimately wanted to be loved by my parents. I wanted to matter. And, this is a couple years back that I'm going through this. And so it's all still kind of playing out. But I decided that I had to figure out how to handle things. When somebody belittles me, what's going on? Why are they using an abnormal coping skill? Is it valid? Is it valid to really belittle somebody? Or is there a way to actually say, hey, I'm challenged with what you just did. I'm sure that you have the good intentions. I'm sure you're not maliciously trying to hurt me. But to be honest, with the way you the way we're approaching this, it's not helping me, solve this, this situation. It's not helping you solve this situation. So we can either decide to try to solve it together, or maybe we just need to, take a time out and determine how we're going to do this later on. And so I really started working on that, and that's not easy, because you're reprogramming. You're literally reprogramming your brain, rewiring it, because you're having to break all your old habits, all your neural pathways that, that electric signal's just screaming down, and you have to start rewiring it in a different way. And that's through repetition, that's through visualization, that's through, I didn't handle this situation correctly, so would I like to handle it? And really reflecting on you, gaining that self-awareness. And that was the first step. I threw myself into college when I got out. It was college was a huge thing for my family. Military was super big, very patriotic family, but college was that step up because it's what my dad never accomplished. And so college was the thing. And so not being the as smart as I wanted to be in high school, that was a huge challenge between my dad and I. And so I threw myself into college and actually just graduated with my degree in marketing and entrepreneurship last June, a couple months ago.
Congratulations, man. I mean, I talk a lot about college because if anybody's been listening, they know my son has decided not to go to college right now. I think I was the first out. There was one in my family before me that had gotten a college degree. I have a master's degree. I was the first in the whole lineage to get a master's degree. I don't use it. I learned a massive amount of skills from it. I was a teacher for 13 years, but so there's a lot of conversation about this. But what I love about it was, is for you. It sounds to me like you did it for you. Especially, my dad has dyslexia really bad. He's very dyslexic. He talks a lot about that and the struggles. But I want to go back to the trigger points. When you were reading off, or not reading, just reciting your trigger points, I'm like, check. But the thing is working with men, talking to a lot of men, I'm realizing we all have really similar trigger points. And what are the responses? It's usually escape, anger, numbing, and my friend Kurt Storing talks a lot about this. He talks about creating space, and I think you kind of nailed it on the head. Something happens, I need to create this space where I reflect and understand, okay, why am I responding this way, and what's the most appropriate way to respond? So really glad you talked about that. I mean, I still work with this today, every day that something happens. What is your coping? What are the skills that you use in that situation?
Depends on how escalated the crisis is going to get, and I had to create something like, if it's, that initial thing where I feel a little buzzed, and it's almost like I get a tingling sensation or a flash of something. It's like, okay, I don't need to react, and so that's like, I'll take a deep breath. So I use breathing, a lot of like Navy SEAL breathing, 4-count breathing, box breathing, I think is what they call it. Yep. So I'll do that. If it goes further than that, and that, there's another statement, or I don't maintain myself and I respond, then I'll take a step back. because I don't want to go towards the situation, because if I'm going towards it, then that means I'm getting aggressive. And so I'll take a step back. Another thing that I learned from dialect behavioral therapy is, different mnemonics that I can recite. And then ultimately, if it's really getting bad, it's like, okay, Joe, is this really a situation you want to be in? Because you know where it's going to go, and you know how these type of situations respond. I need to take a time out. And so I'll tell myself time out, and I'll just leave the room. And I don't just leave, slam the door or anything like that. It's like, okay, I need to take a time out right now. I need to regather myself because I want to handle this situation in a healthy way. And I make sure to always state that that's my goal, is I want this handled in a healthy way. And so I will tell that to whoever I'm talking to, and then I will go in my office. I'll put on some music. I love Andre Bolicelli, so I put on like something very beautiful, something calming, and really try to just breathe it out. If it goes past that, then I'll grab an ice cube, and that cold, put cold water on your face. Ice cubes in your hands, those type of things, that will actually cause you'll have a physical reaction, which will cause your body to respond, which will take all that cortisol and all that adrenaline and kind of cause it to dissipate a little bit. And then I'll take a timeout after that. And it's one of those things where, I'm practicing it every day, because I can get upset about anything. I can get upset about, the way the leaves on the tree aren't, blowing in the wind, and that's just random as heck, but I have a choice, and it's, do I want to have other people control me, or do I want to be in control of myself? Because if I allow their responses, if I allow their actions, if I allow their abnormal coping skills to trigger me, then I'm giving them power over me.
100%.
And for me, I want to be a good person. I want to be a problem solver. I want to be a person that loves, that's kind, that's, like I said, patient, that recognizes that life isn't easy. Life's a struggle. We're all fighting through it. We all have we all have different ways of describing our traumas, our trials, our challenges. But at the same time, our bodies are going through, our bodies are responding very similarly, with the cortisol, with the adrenaline, with the aggression, with all these things. And I don't want to give that. I want to be better than that. I want to be somebody who can persevere through my programming to become somebody better, to become somebody who can link arms with those who are struggling, those who are dwelling in darkness, and help them take step forward. Because, you were right when you said most people are saying don't join the military. The military is incredible. It has an incredible bonding experience. Those bonds come from the most challenging times, because you have to get through them together. And so that's great. But those challenging times, I'll tell you what, especially when it comes to war, it's inhumane. You see things, you go through things that you just question how humanity can justify that. And it impacts you, because you have memories you can never get rid of. And they're there. You have friends you don't get to see anymore, you have civilians living in fear, and you have humans acting against humans in some of the most atrocious ways. And we can justify it. I mean, 9/11 happened. That's not cool. We had to do something, because we don't ever want that to happen on American soil again. I fully understand that. But at the same time, my question is what was the sequence of events that led to a person justifying that horrific action? What traumas did they go through? What abnormal coping skills did they, adopt, so that they could say, hey, killing thousands of people is okay? Um, and that's, that's the challenge. And so I want to be a person that brings hope to tomorrow. And for me, hope lies in perseverance. Because if you don't persevere through your struggle, then you're defined by your struggle. That struggle then becomes who you are, and that's your limit. If you don't persevere through it, then that's what you bring to the table. And I don't want to bring my struggles to the table anymore. I want America to be better. I want us to see each other as humans, where we link arms together, and you've persevered through things that I might be struggling, and I would be humbled if you would link arms with me and help me walk through that darkness. Maybe I've persevered through things you're struggling with, and I want to link arms with you. And the reality is that we allow our experiences to help us navigate to a better tomorrow, rather than our abnormal coping skills and our ability to justify why I'm right and you're wrong. And so it's the philosophy I bring when I'm helping people. It's the philosophy I bring when I was going through, my classes and and being dyslexic in college at the University of Washington is not easy. But with that, it's what I brought. It's everything that we face is like, okay, this is a challenge. We can be defined by it, or we can persevere through it, and we can gain a better understanding of what we're able to be. Because if you persevere, if you really think about it, you can persevere through anything. And I can state that because, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, he was able to get through the Holocaust. How? I can't even comprehend the gravity of what he went through. But for him to be able to write that book, he had to persevere through a lot. Mm-hmm. And, it's how deep are you willing to go? How deep are you willing to go to have a conversation with somebody you might disagree with, or someone who hurt you? How deep are you willing to go and persevere through that moment where somebody completely egregiously wronged you, and you have every right to be mad, but you decide to forgive because you recognized that their symptoms are what hurt you. So what's the root cause in their life? And that's ultimately what I had to do with my dad. I love my dad. Great man. I truly do. Like I said, my dad spent his life helping kids with spinal bifida, cerebral palsy stand. And he was so gentle and so tender with them. And he's just an incredible human for, putting that as his life work. But him and I struggled because he had to grow up. And I was, he was young when he had me. But then I realized, the challenges that him and I faced, they came from somewhere. And so I started researching his past. And my grandfather was a B-24 pilot, got shot down, from what I understand, shot down, not the wings split, doing those type of things but the hard landings where you're basically bellying the aircraft into the ground because, the wheels aren't coming down or something. But, I heard like 6 times.
Wow.
I have a map with his co-pilot's blood in it as he's trying to, it's the silk mats, and he's trying to save him. And so I know he went through a lot. And when he came home, it was really challenging. And he took it out on my dad. And, unfortunately, my grandfather committed suicide when my dad was 12 because he couldn't handle it anymore. And I can relate to both sides now because I remember what my dad, when I was 3, the challenges I went through. But I also remember when I came home from war, when I came home in 04, 05, 08, 09, and 2011 wasn't 2011. We were kind of shutting down Iraq, but then 2014 was my Afghanistan tour. And I remember not being able to fully comprehend everything I just went through and how alcohol and parties and how I was running 24/7, 365 to get away from myself and all the memories I had. And so It's one of those things where I challenge anybody, to make today better than yesterday. Whatever it is, start with that victory. If it's making your bed, do it. If it's working out, do it. Don't push it till tomorrow, because tomorrow will never come, because you'll always say tomorrow. Do it today. Fight for yourself.
That's what we call the 100% principle, which is, I mean, it's just, wording, but literally, define what your 100% for success in each area of your life is for that day, and shoot for that, and then go above it. 1% better every day. You're going to be so much more amazing in a year than you can even imagine. But I want to share with you something, because a large part of my audience is very acute to the story. One of my very first guests was a very dear friend of mine, Eric LeClaire, and I received a suicide text from him 7 months ago, and unfortunately, he was successful. And a lot of what you talk about, man, it's tough. It's tough sitting here, but I cannot think but be, and I cannot. It's incredibly important and amazing that there's men like you who've actually gone through this and lived through it, because I think that's where the impact starts to be, because just you telling that story starts to shed a light a little bit on the coping and the things that were seen when he was a part of the Army, and then the things that he was going through. And unfortunately, I'm not, some people will define him by, his challenge, his end challenge. That's definitely not what I'm defining him as, but I really thank you for opening up and sharing that story for all of us who've been impacted. It means a lot, but on the other end, it's like a life goal of mine for other people to not be like I was about soldier suicide, PTSD, and all these things that are occurring, because we just don't know. And I was kind of like, yeah, it's horrible. It's this thing over here. But I just want everyone to kind of try and personalize it, because there's somebody in their lives that is or has been affected by it. And I think you sharing is such an important thing. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Let's bring it a little closer home, though. We're living in unprecedented times. Mm-hmm. We had something that was hunting us, and we didn't know if we were going to survive or not. We were told to isolate and live in an environment that we really weren't familiar with, aka our homes all the time. We went through a lot, and we're watching news headlines, and we're seeing friends. I mean, I had friends that unfortunately passed from this pandemic. And when people would ask me, how are you handling the pandemic? I'd be like, well, this reminds me of my 5th deployment. And that's what I would do. And I don't say that, lightly, because it's hard. And as we're coming out of this pandemic, a lot of us have created abnormal coping skills to survive it. We're seeing a lot of very emotional reactions. We're seeing people struggling. And this is where each of us, we have to evaluate ourselves, but we also have to look to the left and right. Because when our buddies, and let's be honest, I mean, one of my dear friends was successful ending his life. And that day, he asked if we wanted to go golfing, and I would never have guessed it. I never would have guessed it. And we were just stunned when it happened. And, and that's where we have to start really, instead of just being, hey, how you doing? And doing that small talk, we have to ask the questions. Okay, bud, how are you really doing? Like, I get it. This hasn't been easy. There's been a lot. We know what our friends are generally going through, but we ask and we really take an interest in who they are and where they are mentally. Because the reality is that for us as a community, for us as a state or a country to move forward, we have to care about that mental health of the person to the left and the person to the right of us, because we're in this together. And If we continue to just solely look at our own world and solely focus on our own successes and our own, moving forward, which is great. I'm not saying don't do that, but let's expand our horizon and let's figure out a way to all rise together rather than just, me being concerned with me accomplishing my dreams and my goals and making, living in the yacht I want.
Right.
And that's something that is dear to me because we're in this together. If we want to save the planet, we've got to do it as a team. If we want to cure, whatever, we've got to do it as a community. If we want to stop the division and we want to unify this country and turn it back into a place that has hope, opportunity, we have to realize that means each of us live our best each day. And we do it not just for ourselves, but to be the person who perseveres through the challenge so that we can teach somebody in the next generation how they can pioneer and persevere through their challenges. And we start teaching people how to hope again. And we start teaching people how to take steps forward, even when it seems so daunting that you don't know how you're going to do it. It's that will save America. It's that will save humanity. It's that which will save our planet. And it's that has to happen at each house. It has to happen in each community. And it's that where we see progress, in my opinion. And so,
yeah, I mean, you addressed so many things there,
yeah,
and no doubt, Eric, the pandemic was part of what was going on, as well as, the things that happened in Afghanistan. It was right after that. Of course, that was really, really hard for him. And I think
Afghanistan was really hard.
Yeah, there's just so many lessons to be learned, and there's so many things that we can glean from all of these. And you are so passionate about it. It's so incredibly invigorating because, even in my day, there's some hiccups with business, and it's just like, how in the world am I going to get through this? And like, is everything going to fall apart? And then you gain some perspective. Well, wait a minute, this isn't really that bad. And it's just really good to have that reminder. So you, some other struggles in your life, you did share that you have been divorced, and that was maybe a kick in the teeth a little bit.
Oh, it happened. Yeah, it's more than a kick in the teeth. Divorce is the hardest thing. I got married extremely young, had my first son extremely young. I didn't even know who I was at that point in my life. And, I got married for the wrong reasons. I thought I loved her and I honestly, I hope she's doing well, but I was a young male and I wanted to be loved. And so I thought the way to be loved is through marriage. But the thing that I realize is until I know who I am, until I recognize where I'm at and I can be comfortable in my own skin, I mean, the way I love is always going to be limited. And it's not going to be that true patience. I wasn't patient. I was quick to temper. I found myself challenged a lot, and I had to recognize my contributions to the divorce. And that's where it really hurts because I'm not innocent. I contributed. And the impact it's had on my kids, that's where it hurts the most. Because unfortunately, they're going to have to persevere in a lot of ways that I did. I basically just recreated everything that I was challenged with growing up, and I put it on them. And, that hurts. because the one thing I want them to have a better life than me. I want them to enjoy a better tomorrow and be able to reach for the stars even further than I can imagine. And I want to give them everything that I possibly can so that they can see that they have the ability to hope. They have the ability to persevere. But sadly, I put a major challenge that I don't think they're fully aware of in their life, that they're going to have to persevere through. And it took me 37 years to, well, not 37, 35 years to figure that out. You know, before I'd even address it, it took me 30, I'm 40 now. And so I'm still going through it, and every day is a fight.
I would imagine they're in better shape just because they have your experiences to draw from. And one thing I feel very strongly about is that the strongest people and the people who grow the most are the ones who share and step into their own vulnerability through their failures, their mistakes. And you've stepped straight right in the middle of the pile of vulnerability.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
you know, I believe strongly that alone is going to lead to conversations with your kids like, hey, here's where I messed up.
Yeah.
And this is not about you. Those conversations can go so far. And this is, Joe, this is such a regular conversation for men in the group. And something I say often really kind of hits really hard and typically rubs guys the wrong way. And that's like, hey, like if you're divorced, I'm asking you to take 100% responsibility.
Yeah.
And I want to hear what your response is to that, because, you know,
I had a choice to react or not, and I chose to react. It's one of those things that absolutely you have to take 100% responsibility, because it was your decision. You're the one who controls what you do and don't do. You're the one who determines if those words are going to leave your mouth or not. And you're the one who determines how you're going to respond to the other person's symptoms. Abnormal coping skills is what I call them.
Yeah.
And it's 100% you, because you're the one who controls you, not them.
Yeah, I was not sure how you were going to answer, but that is definitely the point in which I come from, is like, and you said something earlier that really struck a chord with me. And a man that I find is full of wisdom. He once said, Scott, your response is your responsibility. And it was really like, it hit me. I think about that all the time. Like, no matter what happens on the exterior, I can't control that. I can only control how I respond internally and physiologically, which I use box breathing, the 4-count breathing, and then some other things to stop that overhaul. I use a lot of the same things, but that's how we can control creating space. And so I'm really happy to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah. You know, for me, I have a toolkit of things that I've gone through, and it was always like, okay, you know, what's a new way that I can create a normal coping skill so I handle this? And unfortunately, this is after the divorce and everything. And it is all about, how can I add something new to my life that is going to allow me to handle the crisis that I might face today. You know, from tapping to, you know, I love to play golf when I'm frustrated, not because it's just I get out and I get the walk, and golf can be a frustrating sport, but you know, find the things that you love to do that speak to you. Waterfalls are another. That's a huge thing for me. Is if I need to reset, you know, something happened, I might not have handled it the way I wanted to. You know, first thing is you have to be willing to reflect, and I always reflect from my perspective. I always reflect from their perspective, and I always reflect from a third person's perspective, an outside, like an observer's perspective, to see, okay, what are commonalities, you know, because, you know, there were some things that I did that I never wanted to admit I did, because it was like, oh, it's not that big. You know, it's not that big of a deal. You know, my temper, it's not that big of a deal. I'm not that loud. I'm not that aggressive. You know what I mean? And I could always minimize myself or my actions because I could justify it. And so what I did is that's another thing, is I'd always look and like, okay, who's saying this besides me? Because I'm saying it's not a big deal, but my ex is definitely saying it's a big deal. My kids are saying it's a big deal. I've had some friends, that have seen me kind of go, and they're like, dude, what's going on? And so there's a truth somewhere else, and it's not just what I'm holding or justifying in myself. And so I had to be willing to look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, be willing to be honest with yourself. And that's hard to do. Trust me, I've heard a million people say that, but I never really understood what it was until I was willing to look at what they were seeing.
There's a guy up in your area who wrote a book and talks about perceptual intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what you're talking about here. In fact, he's a golfer, Eric Van Alstyne. And I went through a training with him, and it's all about, okay, here's the story you're seeing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing you're seeing. Now, what is that other person seeing? What's the lens they're seeing? And then you branch that out. And when you practice those things of, this is how I see it now, how might the person over to the side of me see it? And how might that, and all of a sudden you're like, huh, yeah, there's a lot more to this than I've internalized and I've processed at this point. And I feel like the world would be such a better place if we all were working on our perceptual intelligence.
It's part of that perseverance because we have to.
Yeah.
The world doesn't revolve around me.
Right.
As much as I wanted it to in my my teenage years, my 20s, my 30s, I'm stuck with me every day. And that's not a bad thing because I actually really enjoy me now. I really like who I am. But with that, I need to recognize that there are 7.2 billion people on this earth. What makes me better or less than any of them? And so that's something I've really had to also just think about, meditate on, because the people around me, my friends, my children, those who I'm close to, they matter. They're important. I want them to win too. And I don't want my abnormal coping skills or my response to a situation to have an impact that they're having to deal with 30 years down the road. And so, it's about finding those healthy coping skills. It's about encouragement. It's about showing people and being, through your actions, representing, the ability for me to persevere. And also being willing to genuinely say sorry and apologize for your missteps, but more importantly, forgive those who misstepped against you.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Really good. I'm going to turn the page a little bit here.
Okay.
This because this is just, it's deep, really good stuff. And I know for a fact that a lot of what you're talking about for men, especially when you talk about trigger and responding with words and anger and perseverance, these are the things that we all think we're living in isolation. We all think that no one else is experiencing the same way as we are, but we are all experiencing it on some level. And I've noticed that the more I've done work with men, the more I've noticed that anger and triggers are such a big part of life. So I'm really glad we covered that. I've been standing here the whole time on this interview and doing everything I can not to bring this bag that's sitting in front of me up to my face. I absolutely am addicted to coffee. I love coffee, but it's the smell of coffee does something extraordinary for me. And I've had a lot of coffee across my desk, and I just received this in the mail. This is BoneFrog, and this is the medium roast. I have 3 other roasts back there, but we're going to be giving them away by the way. So if you like coffee, you need to pay attention to my stuff. So you work for BoneFrog Coffee, and Tim, the founder, 25-year Navy SEAL, and then kind of put together this mission. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I'd be remiss to let that go, because the more I dug into it, disclosure, I had to go look and say, what does BoneFrog even mean?
Yeah.
And so I did that, and then I started watching the videos on the site, and obviously have some coffee here that I can't wait to try. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I want men to understand the bigger meaning other than just really great coffee, because he did do a lot of work to make sure the coffee's sourced and the best quality possible.
Oh yeah. So, BoneFrog, it's those who, it's the Navy SEALs that sacrificed everything for us. It's it's a sacrifice that I've seen firsthand, flying support over them. It's a sacrifice that are some of the harder memories, because they gave everything so that myself, my children, my friends can have a better tomorrow than today. And they believed with all their heart in what the flag represented. And so when Tim was up there at his retirement ceremony, he's looking across the crowd and he's seeing empty seats. He's seeing friends that should be there that aren't. And he decided that, at that moment, he had to do something to keep their legacy, to keep their stories alive. And he came up with this incredible idea to create a company that inspired conversation, and it inspired perseverance. It inspired people to become something better. And to do that, he wanted to really he wanted to capture the stories of those who sacrificed everything, because we wouldn't have the opportunity today that we have if they weren't willing to do what they were willing to do. And so BoneFrog Coffee, to honor the best, we had to partner with the best. We partnered with Dave Stewart, the founder of Seattle's Best, the one that really gave Howard Schultz a run for his money.
Yeah.
He came out of retirement to help us, because our mission is to honor the fallen by living our best life, but not forgetting their sacrifice and their stories as we strive to become a better person, a better community, a better country. And it's the one thing where Tim and I both agree we can unify, communities, if we just come to the determination that we're going to be better today than we are yesterday, because we want to honor the fallen with everything we do. We want to make sure that their sacrifice wasn't in vain. And so the best way to do that is through conversation. The best way to do that is through linking arms with those who are struggling and helping them, take that next step forward. And not just, one step, but being there for the fight. Just like our brothers in arms who sacrificed everything are still there for us. Mm-hmm. It's a deep mission. It's something that, I'm so thankful to be a part of this team. I'm so thankful to be a part of this message, because this is where I see us, and a lot of things I said before actually coming to fruition, because we're taking those steps. We're pushing, we're driving, we're living a life that we talk about, and we're doing it the best we can. And each day we learn, each day we become better, each day, we take that next stride. And so BoneFrog Coffee is something so much more than coffee. To me, it's something where you're starting your day off recognizing the sacrifice that it took for you to have the opportunity today. You're starting your day off with a great cup of coffee that's going to give you the energy, and at least I hope it does, to take those next steps forward. You're starting your day off, with a victory. And so I want each and every one of our consumers to live their dream, to become something bigger than they ever could imagine, to shoot for the stars, and but just to remember the sacrifice that it took to create the foundation for them to be able to do that.
That's incredible. And that's what I kind of gleaned doing my research. I mean, even Tim said, we want to have conversations. And what do you do when you have a conversation? You sit down and have a cup of coffee. It's just such a beautiful marriage, right?
Yeah, it is.
And of course, in the Pacific Northwest, where, coffee's kind of started the big, just I don't know if it was the revolution or the change of how coffee was seen, but
I think the revolution would be a good way. I mean,
yeah.
Howard Schultz and Dave Stewart really, if you really look at the history of coffee, they're the ones who brought coffee to the world in the way we drink it today. And so it's really humbling to be able to have a person like Dave see the mission, believe in the mission, and say, okay, let's do this, because America is amazing. I mean, just to be here with all the challenges we're facing, with everything that we're dealing with, we are still such an incredible place. Mm-hmm. And the goal is let's make tomorrow better than today. Let's take those steps forward. And that's what we're doing. And we're the land of opportunity. It's where a kid who barely graduated high school joins the military and becomes an Apache pilot, who's challenged beyond challenged once he loses his helicopter, but can go to school, get his degree in marketing and entrepreneurship, can work with, and then work with an incredible company, BoneFrog Coffee, and learn how to take steps forward in the direct to consumer market and the wholesale, and learn these different skills and these different traits. And I can also, I'm working with a couple biotech companies just as on the side, learning what they're doing, and I can continue to strive forward because, my ultimate dream, what am I shooting for the stars? Like, if I had my ultimate dream right now, I would define it as I would love to eradicate heart attacks and strokes. And there's a way to do it. And so I'm doing my research in those things. And because I want us to, completely get rid of that vascular plaque that's hardening our arteries. Now, that's a challenge. That's a mind-blowing challenge, but it's possible. There's a way. Start. Yeah. It change starts with a dream. Mm-hmm. And as I say, we're already on Mars. So who's going to take us to Andromeda? And I'm looking forward to that journey.
Yeah. Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure. Just love your mission, love your vision, love your passion and purpose, and just the word perseverance. I mean, you live it and you're sharing it, and that means a ton to me. I'm looking forward to more. I'm so excited that BoneFrog is, locked arms with Brotherhood to just in this small but very meaningful event, start something. And that's incredibly, I'm incredibly blessed. And so with that, I want to thank you for being a guest. I will put all the ways that people, they need to buy some BoneFrog coffee. They need to be a part of that. So we'll put the links in the comments. But thank you, brother.
Thank you. Anybody who's going through it, hey, look me up, reach out, because I want you to succeed. Be a part of this, community. I'll tell you what, Scott, what you're doing, what you're saying, these are the types of things that we've got to keep doing, because what you're doing is the impact I'm talking about. And when, I'm going to a guys group that I meets over in Issaquah this afternoon, where it's called Holy Smokes. We have some wine, we smoke some cigars, but it's that same thing. And we're having the real conversations, and we're in this together, and to hear what you're doing. I want to go on the ruck march. To be honest with you, that's where perseverance begins, is when you do something you don't think you can do, and you're like, no, I'm going to do it. And it started with the ruck march, where my dad, told me that quote. And so I challenge people, put a backpack on, see what you can do, because you know what? The more you learn how to persevere, the more confidence you're going to have in yourself, which then you're going to start to realize that's where hope resides. And so when that next challenge phase, or you get hit with that next challenge, then you'll realize, hey, I have what it takes to persevere through this.
Absolutely. And that's what I'll do when I'm feeling especially challenged. I'll add more weight to my ruck ruck pack and just go and be like, if I can get through that, especially in Texas heat above 100 degrees, I'm going to be okay.
Texas heat. I used to live in Texas. Texas heat is a melter, and for you to be able to do that, again, you can do anything.
Probably dangerous, but again, Joe, thank you very much. Listeners, thank you so much. Man, this thing is jam packed. Make sure you go listen again. But here's a suggestion from me. Go pick this up on YouTube. We don't have a big YouTube following. Go pick this up on YouTube because Joe's background is actually a picture he took, I believe, from Apache over Afghanistan, and it's phenomenal. And you'll catch that in the interview. I've been staring at it the entire time. It's been entrancing, and I'm sure there's so many stories and amazing things. But again, thank you, Joe, and thank you for the listeners. I'll see some of you at the big event, Montana, in September. The rest of you, keep your ears tuned. We're doing more.
Thank you for listening to the Brotherhood of Fatherhood podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends, your family, and follow us on social media. If you are a father, make sure you join our Facebook group, the Brotherhood of Fatherhood. Hit the subscribe button and tune in next time for more podcasts from the Brotherhood of Fatherhood.